What is up, y'all? Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. We, of course, are the Alternates. I am your host, Brian Cullen, and with me, as always, is the Valley Valkyrie,
I like it.
Clayton Stevens.
Always good to have some alliteration first thing in the morning.
Yeah. It's the only thing I'm good at, if we're being honest. It's the only thing I'm good at. We've got a great show lined up for you today. Before we jump in, I want to take a quick second, ask you all to subscribe to the show on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Go ahead and like the video, drop us a comment. If you're listening to the show, leave us a rating and review, especially on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us out, and it helps people just like you find us. So let's continue to grow this whole thing.
Yep.
And just boost our egos.
That's what this is all about.
Yeah, I couldn't care less about basketball or music. This is an ego. I'm hunting.
I love it. Feed it to me.
We're going to need a bigger studio soon to get these heads in here.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to get a hold of us, you can do so by emailing the show, thealternatehoop@gmail.com, and go ahead and follow us on TikTok at The Alternates NBA. Clayton, we've got a fun episode today.
Yes, sir. We do.
Another special guest coming in.
It's the summertime. We're bringing them in.
Summer interview.
I love it.
Yeah, this is interview boy summer, I guess.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
We're gonna work on that one.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
Yeah, I really boosted the alliteration and then just fell off a cliff there.
Yeah, that was rough. But we're gonna figure out a good one.
But we've got a good friend of ours joining us in just a moment here, where we talk to Bob Shed.
Bob Shed. That's right.
Host of the Axe to Grind podcast, one of the co-creators of the incredible hardcore festival Sound and Fury, which is happening right now, which is why he's in town.
Yep.
And joining us in the studio. So we're going to talk to him about music, his love for basketball, and everything in between. That's coming up right now. Thank you so much. All right. Well, as promised, very special guest in the studio, the second one to come in the studio while both of us are here.
Yep.
Oh, okay, good.
Usually our guests come in when Clayton's on the road. So you are the second timer with a gruesome threesome. What would you call it? I have no
Something
idea.
like that.
I wish, if it was Jerian, Jalaton, and Job, it could be the triple J's,
Oh, we already had an alliteration conversation today.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I love alliteration. It's one of my favorites.
As a former English major, you can't get away from it. It's like, and it's I'm more of an onomatopoeia kind of guy, but I'll take alliteration any day too.
Can you spell onomatopoeia?
Yes, I can.
Wow.
O-N-O.
I'm not even going to fact check this.
M-A-T-O-P-E-I-A, I believe.
I'll believe it.
But
I
it
mean-
looks like onomatopoeia. Something like that.
Interesting.
If I'm wrong,
ways you
hold
remember
it against me personally, please.
Yeah. Send the hate mail to the comment section.
Yes.
But Bob, thank you so much for joining us. We are very excited to have you here. Very lucky that you happen to be on our coast in the off season.
The best coast. So thank you. I'm super psyched to do this.
You don't believe that. You don't.
I do,
An
actually.
East Coaster, you believe this is the best coast?
Yeah, I do. And I live near the ocean too. So I'm a ocean-centric kind of dude. California's fantastic. It's
Okay.
a really wonderful place to be, to live. It's just it costs so darn much, guys.
Yeah,
It's a
it does
really
cost a
expensive
lot.
place to live.
Yeah.
But when I said it yesterday, the flight touched down, I'm like, what am I doing? Why don't I just live here? This is fantastic. So no, I really do. It's a great place.
You can just
to
live
be.
here in the studio. It's yours.
I mean, there is room for a cot, and that's about all I need.
That's
Well, as we alluded to, you're from the East Coast. You're in town right now.
Yes.
You are one of the founders and creators of Sound and Fury.
I am, yes.
As well as host of the incredible podcast Axe to Grind. And you're here. So tonight, literally tonight, you're doing a live recording.
Our very first live Axe to Grind.
Wow.
So this is the first time we've ever done it, performing live, doing it live. It's really exciting. And it's something I actually was thinking about. I was like, and at a certain point you start thinking like, oh, what should we do with this podcast? Like what do we do with this? Do we do live? And we've been asked before, and we've had some opportunities to do stuff in New York City. And that's something we kind of have always wanted to do, but things didn't line up, right? But with Sound and Fury, it was just kind of like, damn, this is the right place. It's the right energy. Sound and Fury's been going on for a long time, but I've always kind of been even after no longer being fully involved, I've been along the, on the sidelines of it, And so when Riley, who nascently runs Sound and Fury at this point with Martine and then Madison as well, asked, he was like, we got to do this. We've been talking about it. We talked about doing it pre-pandemic. We talked about doing it in 2019, but there's just too much going on. So we just kind of everything lined up. So we're doing our first one. It's going to be at Brain Dead Studios tonight, and it's really exciting. It should be a different kind of energy.
Have you been to the Brain Dead Studios before?
I have not.
It's
not at
cool.
all.
So it's in an old. It used to be forever. Growing up, it was the silent movie theater.
Yep.
And then Brain Dead took it over a couple years ago, and they show movies there. They show all kinds of cool, like old. They did like a Cronenberg thing last month. All kinds of awesome stuff. I saw a Ceremony there a few months ago. They did a record release for that last 7-inch.
Yeah. Oh, that's
and
awesome.
they did like a performance where it was all seated, and they played more of their stuff that would be a seated type ceremony
were there
performance.
people like tapping their leg as Ceremony's playing? That feels kind of like counter to the experience.
I wish I got to go to this. I was out of town for it. Gag played there, and I really would have been curious to see that, because Gag, that's not the type of show where you would be seated in an old movie theater.
Okay, so
I'm so into that though. Somebody in my mid-30s, I'm like, can every show be seated now?
I would love to see Gag seated. It's perfect for me.
I'm retired to the balcony at every show now.
So for the same kind of energy, are you guys familiar with the band from Denver from a few years ago, City Hunter?
Oh yeah,
okay.
Big time.
So they played a movie theater in Brooklyn. Maybe it was Nighthawk. Was it Nighthawk? It was something, but it was a little larger than this room that we're in right now.
Which is huge, by the way.
Giant studio. Thank you, audience. 35 to 50 person capacity.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine was lucky enough, he got tickets. It sold out within minutes.
Yeah.
I believe it's the only time they played the East Coast. I could be wrong, but we went, and it was a surreal experience, because they're up there ripping fast hardcore, just blazing through it, and everyone's sitting down, except for, and we got there too late to get seats, so we're standing in the back.
Yeah.
And it was just this experience as the singer, who is, in the full gear. He's got gloves on, got the mask on, the whole thing. And everyone's just kind of sitting there. And it's like, when they finish, do we all like politely clap, or just what do you do? And it was fast. It was fantastic, because it was just too surreal to be. So I imagine a Gag set sitting would be a comparable parallel.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, and it's going to be a fun night, I'm sure, at Brain Dead. Everything.
I will not be wearing a leather mask. I'll just put that out there for everybody.
Fair enough.
Come on, we can edit that out. You want people to come, right?
I will be wearing a leather mask. Yeah. There we go. Thank you.
All right, Bob. Well, let's take it back to the beginning here for the people that are watching that maybe aren't familiar with you, and all that stuff. So where did you grow up? And then how did you get into punk rock and all that stuff? Let's take it back to the beginning for a second.
Jeez. Okay, so where I grew up is a complicated question, because I try to tell people I wasn't a military brat, but my mother was, and she essentially rescued my father out of the South Boston projects. So they bounced around, and I was born outside of Denver, Colorado, and then lived in upstate New York. But where I got into punk was I moved to Brick, New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore when I was 12. To try to give, how can I compare this for people on a more national level? It was moving from a small but nice town, kind of a little bit more quaint, to a place that was a lot more action heavy and lively. So I also went from going to a K through 6 elementary school to a 6 through 8 middle school. So I moved at the end of 6th grade. So I never graduated elementary school. Everybody, if I can do it, you can also be a success in life without graduating elementary school. But there was a certain level of culture shock, hard age to move. I got to say that, being 12 and moving. So I'm ripped away from my friends, all the kids I grew up with playing sports and doing this and that. I'm now like, oh, I guess I'm kind of like a loner guy now. All right. I don't have friends. I don't have these established buddies. And I think that is kind of the seed that plants that gets me into punk. Slowly but surely, I, start meeting kids and started meeting people who were already into punk and hardcore music. And so, yeah, I got into it. And it's funny. It was the mid 90s. There was this big kind of resurgence in classic and 80s hardcore, especially where I lived. That was really big. So, I always tell people my first 4 CDs, I got the Bad Brains Roar Sessions, the self-titled, Descendants All, the 10-Yard Fight CD, Hardcore Pride.
Hell yeah.
And what was the other? The other was Gorilla Biscuits Start Today.
It's a pretty good starter pack.
Wow.
Right. But that also sort of like, if anybody's familiar with Ice to Grind, they're going, yeah, that tracks for this dude,
Yeah.
So I had this kind of classical interest in punk and hardcore with like a straight edge, kind of lean. But I started going to shows at like spiky punk shows. So I was the kid, I never understood. I was like, I did a weird thing with my hair in 8th grade where I like spiked it up with gel, and the cute girl who's like the head of the class like kind of made fun of me under her breath. So like, I don't really want to do that. So I never spiked my hair, did the punk thing, but I was just a kid in a sweatshirt. But I went to all these spiky punk shows. So that was the scene I got into. And then when I started going to the more like straight edge, like youth crew, you're wearing a plain gray shirt, who's sweatshirt, you fit with us.
Yeah.
I was sort of on the outside of that. I didn't have the right cargo shorts on, and we didn't have the reverse weave champion sweatshirt. And my friends were all like punks and skinhead kids. So it was interesting because that was our entry point, but it also coalesced our little town and like surrounding towns into this whole little scene. It was kind of an awesome way to get into the world.
And what about your parents? Were they into music and stuff like that too? Did you hear music before that?
Oh yeah. So my father was super into all sorts of like rock, funk, Motown, basically anything from Stevie Ray Vaughan to Jimi Hendrix to Grand Funk, Earth, Wind and Fire, 70s stuff. He had a really broad palette. My mom too. My mom definitely treads more on the like, I love James Taylor side of things, and that's cool. Like, I'm not mad. Fire and Rain, all that, but they were both into music. My father more so than my mother, but they both love music. So I got that. The story I like to tell, I mentioned those first 4 CDs, right? And Gorilla Biscuits Start Today being the last of them, and it was also, it took me years to realize, like, no, Bob, if you're going through those 4, Bad Brains are the truly exceptional like musicality band, right? Yeah. But to me, I was like hearing Gorilla Biscuits. It's melodic. It just moves. I'm like, this is so cool. My father's best friend growing up, from time he was a kid, like young kid, like elementary school, was my uncle John Baker from Dorchester, Mass. And Johnny Baker was blind from birth, essentially. They palled around, did all sorts of things like letting John drive cars when they were teenagers, and they're driving past a church, and it's like, oh, why is John Baker? Oh, John Baker's blind. Why is he blind? Why is he driving that car? One of their first businesses was a piano tuning and moving company. So my father was not, it's not like he was Hercules or Lou Ferrigno, but he could move pianos, and John Baker could tune them like nobody's business. So he's a very musical guy. So my Uncle Johnny comes down and visits us, and he's like, oh, you're getting into music. What kind of music do you like? And I'm like, oh, I like this stuff. And he's like, all right, put something on. Put it on for me. And I think I had upgraded from the CD of Start Today to vinyl. So I put Start Today. I got the 12-inch. I put it on the record player, and I put it on. The horn starts. And this is a guy who, like, one of the ways he would find his way around his apartment in Dorchester was he had horns hanging up because he could play every instrument. So he had all these horns. So the horns Start Today. He's like, ah! He's sitting there at the dining room table across the room from me. And I'm like, oh no, he's going to go in on me. And it starts, and he's like, Bob, what is this? This is throwing pots and pans down the stairs. And he's like, what is this crap? And I just remember, I was so upset. I'm like, almost in tears, run out of the house, and I'm mad and sad, like only like a 14-year-old can be. And so that was, so there was musicality in the background, but kind of a secondary thing.
Yeah, and like obviously shocking to the older generation.
Yeah, they were certainly like fine with it, but they weren't trying to be like, oh, sure, Bob, go ahead and put on your music while I drive you to school. Totally. It was none of that,
Totally.
So
yeah,
that origin story resonates with me because I was, it's all in LA County because I grew up here, but all of my very young years were in one area out in the valley. I had all of my friends very happy.
Right.
And then we moved to like the opposite side of the county, which it's still LA, but like with traffic in LA, and at that age, you're not driving. It feels like it's 1,000 miles away.
For people not from the area, I actually had this experience with a friend. If somebody goes, oh, I want to visit my friend who lives in LA. Oh, where do they live? The correct answer isn't, oh, they live in LA. That's like saying to somebody, like, oh, I'm going to visit my friend in New Jersey. Oh, where do they live? Oh, in New Jersey. LA County is how many millions of people?
Massive.
And it's big.
Yeah.
Like if you're going from Northridge to, I don't know, city of industry, that's an hour plus. What are we talking about? You know, and different worlds.
Totally. And
so you had that experience of moving.
It felt like I moved cross country, right? And like I don't have a car. The public transit sucks here, so it's like not like easily.
No, that's
visiting
a
friends.
goodbye friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Moment.
And it was 6th grade, so it was the summer before 6th grade. So went to middle school, completely new and it was the like. I was the fun friends with everybody guy, as a kid, and then I moved, and it was such a different vibe too. Like where I was very diverse and like arts and stuff like that were kind of is celebrated, and then I moved to a place where that wasn't the case, and
all of a sudden you're an outsider for being into that stuff.
Exactly. And it was just like, oh, okay, and that it's such a like formative age, the depression starts and all that, and then I hear like. I'm a little younger than you. Like it's the like stages of accessibility, right? Like kids now just open a window, you can find any music you want. Mine was like, surf videos, skate videos, stuff like that. And I remember I was watching, I think it was like a 411 video.
Yeah, I remember those.
And Minor Threat was in it. And it was that, and there was a Taylor Knox surf video that had the Descendants in it.
That's awesome.
And those two things, it was like, oh, this is the audio version of how I feel right now. Yeah. And like that was the draw. And it was like, okay, let's go down this rabbit hole, right?
And it's, especially Minor Threat. I think it's one of those like light switch moments, right?
You hear 1,000%.
Oh, damn. Okay. We should start, like 23andMe, Ancestry.com style.
Yeah.
Track the genome of what inspired you to become a weird kid. And it's a lot of times, because I think we could probably categorize it. Like, did you move between 5th and 7th grade?
Yeah.
Did you have some weird traumatic event in that time frame? What changed for you? Because I bet we could really, it's like, oh, well, 64% of people who get into punk music, they had like a weird moment there in that age range that pushed them to go, I'm looking for something a little different.
Nobody's doing it because they're super, everything's going great, right? Like Hawaii doesn't have like a budding punk scene for a reason, right?
I've had that conversation about certain bands that make more sense in places. Like a friend of mine was like, oh, rival schools didn't make sense to me till I was driving around in Southern California and it was sunny and I had the wind blowing and it was perfect temperature. And I put it on. I'm like, oh, this driving, pulsating, but sort of poppy-ish music really clicks now. So but no, I've only met a few people who it was like purely like, well, my high school was pretty normal, everything was fine, and then I decided I was curious about getting into something, and I decided to get, believe it or not, that's someone's origin story that I know. It's like, and so I was curious, so I did some research and found youth of today and looked into this whole world, and that's how I got into hardcore. That's weirder.
But that's the exception that proves the rule.
Exactly right. That's weirder than being like, yeah, man, I had a rough age 12,
I got bullied. It's that's generally the story. That's right. So you moved at this age and you met kids, you got into punk, but before that, were your parents getting you into sports? Was your dad into sports? Was your mom into sports?
So this is like this weird thing because I was thinking about it for context of this show,
please.
Right? Yes, but in a very casual way. So I mentioned the whole like moving around thing.
Right. Exactly.
My parents ended up moving to Denver in 1977 or 78, and this is for the sports fans out there. The Denver Broncos were getting good. And that's like the Orange Crush, and the story. And it's one of those like familial stories, the stories that your parents tell, and they've told friends of family, and they tell people, and you've heard it 10 times, and it like warms your heart, right? They're like, yeah, we were out, we'd been living in San Diego, and we came, and we're living in Denver, and we're doing all this outdoor stuff, and we're going hiking. So we came back on a Sunday afternoon, and we're like, it's dead. The whole city, and they were living in the city of Denver, and they're like, it is dead quiet. What is going on? And they're like, we lived upstairs, and our landlord was a little old lady who lived downstairs, and she was sitting on the front porch, and she's sitting there listening to the radio. She's listening to a football game, and she's like, and they're walking like, oh hey, Dolly, what's going on? And she's like, oh, you haven't caught Bronco fever yet, huh? And it was this moment where they're like, what? And so I am a lifelong Denver Broncos fan. If anybody wants to challenge me on it, I can show you pictures of me at age 4 holding up John Elway posters like this, looking very serious. I drew this picture of the Denver Broncos helmet, wrote Elway like this. But before that, my dad grew up in the 50s and 60s really in Boston. Loved basketball. Enjoyed football. He actually talks about sneaking into the old Boston Patriots stadium with his friends and seeing football games. I think passing interest in hockey and a really passing interest in baseball because the Red Sox were nothing to speak of for 40 years.
Yep.
But he brought me to Boston Garden in 90, 91. I got to see Larry Bird. I went to the old Garden. It was awesome. I remember watching basketball. Like, I have vivid memories of watching the Rockets Celtics finals in, I guess that's 86. And that's kind of like that germination point. Sports were a casual interest, but I was exposed to them super young and got really in. And it's another one of those, like, you're crossing the interest in how you are wired as a human. I started playing like sports video, Tecmo Super Bowl, where it has the real teams and the real players.
Oh, okay.
Of course.
I mean, you're only playing with Bo Jackson, though. Like, that's the cheat code.
I'm a Denver Broncos fan, bro. I am playing with Steve Sewell and John Elway and Vance Johnson and Mark Jackson and Ricky Nattiel. No, it was, but I got good with the team. So I had a notebook because you could play whole seasons. But after you complete the season, the history is erased. Unless you keep detailed notes in a notepad of your own with handwritten, and I still have them. And I was, a friend of mine was helping me move or pack boxes at some point, and he grabs one of these notebooks and he's like, what's this? And I was like, oh, and I open it up and I start showing him, and it is 30 to 40 pages of season records of like, Rich Gannon was actually very good in that game. He was Vikings quarterback, and I think I clued in on that. So there were seasons where I would play as the Vikings, and did they have Herschel Walker at that point? Yeah, I think so. And so it was really fun. So just these detailed records, like the Super Bowl final, the top runner, all the stuff. So it was this like really like dorky way to interact with sports, and that was this funny point where I was like, hey, you can be a sports fan without being that like, yo bro, don't spill my beer kind of guy.
Right,
And so that really, I got super into sports. So playing sports though, and I say this now as a parent, a father, my son is 8. He loves playing basketball. He plays soccer too. He's into sports. They never pushed me with sports. They were very much on this, we had a pet bird, but they couldn't keep the bird in a cage because they thought it was wrong, So the bird flew around our house and we had to clean up bird shit all over our house. But it's the same thing. And it's something I think about now where my son Easton said the most brilliant thing to me. And I want people to think about what this means. He was like, when I first started playing, and I think he was talking about soccer actually, but he said, when I first started playing soccer, I wasn't good at it. And because I wasn't good at it, I didn't like doing it. So it was really hard. It was hard. I didn't like it. I didn't want to do it. But because I kept playing, I started getting better. Because I got better, it was fun. And because it was fun, I wanted to do it more. And I was like, wow, right. Because I started playing basketball in 3rd grade. But I stopped because I wasn't very good and I hadn't played that much. And so I didn't pick it up again until middle school as I'm sort of by myself. I don't have friends. Yeah. So I'd walk around my neighborhood dribbling a basketball and going and playing by myself and running through these scenarios. And, I'm playing, doing post moves with no one behind me. I'm full on Yi Jianlian on this, playing the empty chair. But it's the one thing as a parent now I think about, I'm like, he he has said thank you to me for pushing him just a little bit. And it's not that, dad who's got, the like bad sports parent who's like, come on, keep going. But just that little encouragement and saying, no, don't get frustrated. Let's keep going. That my parents didn't do, not in any sort of negative criticism of them, but it just wasn't in their nature. And I'm like, oh, if I had gotten that, maybe I would have been a little bit more interested younger and been a little better. And newsflash, I wouldn't have made the NBA. Probably wouldn't have even played college, but I would have been a little better and had a lot more fun with it. And I think it's a really good activity if you can get it. Like a lot of things, if you can have this activity that you can focus on and have fun with, it's a great way to interact.
But if you were one of those like dictators, sports parents, think about how much better your son would be.
All right, so we're gonna go Todd Marinovich. I'm gonna be Dad Marinovich on this. Oh man, that's the horror story.
Soccer's a growing sport here in America.
You have the opportunity to be on the front line of soccer in America.
I need you to practice wearing huge company logos all over you.
You're sponsored today.
Exactly. So we've got your entry into sports and basketball.
Yes.
We've got your entry into punk and hardcore.
Yeah.
And as everyone knows, those two things historically there is almost no overlap in the Venn diagram. I think hardcore actually a little bit less so because there's the basketball shorts. There's kind
10-yard fight.
Yeah, 10-yard fight. Exactly.
Jerseys, fast break.
Exactly.
Sure.
But for the most part, in the zeitgeist of those things, they don't overlap. And that's kind of the show here. So, we've talked about our experiences of those battling things within us. What was that like for you? Was it something that you kind of like kept to yourself? It was like friend group A, I'll talk sports stats. Friend group B, I talk punk and hardcore. Or were you just openly like, yeah, these are the things I like?
So I think I alluded to it, right? My friends I had the bondage pants friends. I had the riot girls and post riot girl era friends. I had the Mohawk friends. I had, like the skinhead friends. Not many of them were big on like, let's talk about the 98 Jazz,
Watch Sports Center and
right.
talk about
and as it's gone on time, a bunch of them have revealed themselves to be into sports, varying levels of different stuff. And so that's become like this funny long-term binding friendship thing. But no, at the time it's funny. I said this up until maybe even 10, probably 15 years ago, I really said I was a football, basketball, and they would kind of jockey for position as my number one, then baseball, then hockey, and what have you. But I love the Denver Broncos. Like they were, the ocean is my religion, but number two was the Denver Broncos for a long time. Go jump on your knees and as the waves hit you in the face, and that's my religion.
Fair.
But the Denver, which was a lot like being a Denver Broncos fan until 1997, you were just getting knocked around. So that's also part of my journey.
I have a cheesehead from that Super Bowl.
Oh, really? Were you a Packers fan?
I like Brett Favre because he was, a big thing. I was young and all of that.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, Raiders though. Raiders is who I.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that off the air. No.
Glutton for punishment.
Truly. So, I moved from Denver to Albany, New York, which is a stronghold for the New York Giants. There's Jets fans, but anyone who's from the greater New York metro area knows you have the Giants, who have won Super Bowls in our lifetime, and then there's the Jets.
Maybe the saddest franchise in all of sports.
Hey, Jets, Jets.
There's a long conversation that I'd love to have with some sports fans about NFL franchises who have not had a true franchise quarterback in our lifetimes. The Jets are one of them. Interestingly enough, the Washington football team, the Commanders now, have not had a true franchise quarterback, but have managed to win a few Super Bowls. I don't think they've had a franchise quarterback since Joe Theismann, but still they've won some Super Bowls. But so getting back to it, I moved to Albany just in time for the Denver Broncos, a team I have the T-shirts. I am what do you want to be for Halloween, Bob? John Elway.
Yeah.
Just in time for them to just get beat up in the Super Bowl by the Giants. And that was not easy. And then they go back, and it's not like there was a lot of Washington fans in the Albany area.
Yeah.
But that didn't stop people from picking on me about being a Broncos fan. And then they go back and get just annihilated by the 49ers. And John Elway spoke for us as a fan base when he said, look, I'd rather not go back to the Super Bowl than to lose another Super Bowl. It was really punishing for a while. So that also was one of those like, look, I had all the friends and we were all buddies, but as soon as football came up, it was like, bam, 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 you like the Broncos, they suck. John Elway, he sucks. That people don't understand what the narrative was. It was like, yo, this is a great quarterback. And now the narrative is this was a great quarterback who's able to put a team on his back and carry a really so-so roster to the highest levels. And then he won 2 at the end, and he's one of the greatest of all time. If you asked somebody in 1992, there was people who dismissed him completely, like, he can't win the Super Bowl.
Well, that was LeBron until he got his ring.
That's right. That's right. And it's funny how that conversation changes. So
I got to ask, though, with
yes.
all of this going on, where like you're obviously upstate New York, right? Mm-hmm. Did you have any Bills like fans friends that were like, "Hey, dude, let's go cry in a corner together"? Because I fully
eventually,
get it.
yes. By year 3, yes. So it was really interesting. There were a lot of so the Giants win the first Super Bowl against the Bills, but there was a lot. So it was mostly Giants fans in Albany.
Sure.
But there were some real casual, like I saw a lot of Jets fans who started getting Bills shirts on, who took it. But yeah, by the end of the first Cowboys Super Bowl, where it was 3 in a row, there was a lot of commiserating. Yeah, there's a lot of people like, hey, how do I get through this? I'm like, all right, come on over. Let's talk.
And then is it Knicks fans mostly in the area? I would imagine.
For the NBA, there's 2 New York City area teams, but the Nets were always seen as like a level below the Jets.
Sure.
Like so right. You have the alliteration that we alluded to, Nets, Jets, Mets. Of that, it was always Mets, Jets, Nets.
Yeah.
The Nets were, which is sad and still.
Yeah.
Brooklyn Nets tickets are shockingly affordable.
Oh,
shockingly. And especially when you compare them in relativity to go into MSG to see the Knicks. Getting mid-tier, mid-level seats for a Knicks game, you can sit 3 rows back on the floor at Barclays.
Yeah, it's the only arena that I've been to, and this is a few years ago, that I've sat in a suite.
That's amazing.
And
That's
it was
awesome.
like $20 to get into a suite.
I went to first home game for Nets this season, which is Hornets Nets. I wanted to go see LaMelo. Me and my son were able to get tickets 3 rows back, like low level.
That's crazy because that still was Harden. That's that's wild.
Durant. I'm as far from the camera as I was to Kevin Durant.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. It was
Insane.
amazing. So
Insane.
So yeah, pro trick: if you're going to New York and want to see some basketball, go over to Barclays.
100%.
You'll be able to get tickets,
Yeah.
especially this coming season.
a great arena too.
Yeah.
It's
So
fantastic.
did you get caught up in Knicks fever at all? Because that's like peak Knicks insanity.
So 90s Knicks, a little bit. I enjoyed it, but you know what the problem is, and people don't talk about this. Ewing was great. He was a stonewall in terms of personality, and so he was so stoic. And you look around the league, the Bulls are popping off. Let me be very clear. Even in New Jersey, the Bulls were significantly more popular than the Knicks.
For sure.
There was always this rivalry, and Knicks fans came out, but it was such a show. And we talked about this. The value of showmanship in the NBA really mattered. Those Knicks teams were fun. They were grinded out. They were hardball. I thought they were a really fun team, but they just didn't have that, excitement factor. Because even as you move in, we were just talking about him off the air. Shaquille O'Neal comes out in 92, and he is just so much more exciting and fun, and his persona on the court was as big as it was off the court.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you could feel that. And so he'll go play Ewing, and they'll have comparable scoring numbers, but Ewing's doing it on these really methodical, mid-range, 12-foot turnaround jumpers, great post play. Shaq's going in and tearing the backboards down. So as a 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old kid, that's the kid who's basketball. That's the guy whose basketball card you want. And Ewing, he's fun, and you know what you're getting. But as the playoff losses, those playoff series against the Bulls, amazing. They're interesting to go back and watch now because it almost feels like a different game.
Yeah.
100%.
but it's still, those are fun teams, and they really went toe to toe. And I have a long-term plan in my head of writing a book about 90s basketball called The Shadow of Chicago. So this is where people are like, do.
Yeah.
And having a chapter on every team of the 90s. And the Knicks chapter would be so close but so far. Because I don't think they ever, even when they made the finals against Houston, against the Rockets, it never truly felt like they had what they needed to be a championship team.
Yeah.
The backcourt was always just solid.
I was going to say that I think it came down to the guards for them.
That's
I think they never had good enough guards. And then until, of course, they sort of stopped becoming the Knicks and they have like the Allen Houstons and that whole era. If Allen Houston had played 6 years before, they probably would have won a title.
Houston's depth at the guard was stupid. Like Cassell was a rookie.
But that's what, what I'm saying.
So
right?
who was Matt Maloney? Do you guys remember Matt Maloney? Is it Maloney? White guard who was like maybe the fourth or fifth guard off the bench, and you go, oh, he would have been third guard in the rotation for the Knicks.
Yeah,
and he was like this stopper. No, if you can, let's go TVA on this and align the timelines. If you shift Ewing's peak, which is that early 90s range, and you get Houston, or you get peak Sprewell, because I always talk about it. People don't go back and look at that Warriors team with Sprewell makes all NBA his second season in the league.
Yeah. Oh, Spree was a monster.
Unreal.
And I think his off the court stuff really takes away, and obviously the Carlisle thing. But if you line up a top level 2 guard or a great point guard on those Knicks teams because you have Mason, you have Oakley. They're doing what they need to. Mason, especially, underrated.
Mace.
Good role.
So good.
Good scorer. Obviously a bruiser.
He can do a little of everything.
Exactly. And played well along Ewing.
Yep.
And you have peak Ewing. That was always their failing. And they just weren't quite enough. And it's funny. You think about the Bulls front court, like they're throwing out Bill Cartwright.
Yeah.
Then in the later years, Longley and bearded center Wennington.
Yeah.
And they never, and then like the rotting corpse of Robert Parrish, who was still pretty good on those late era Bulls teams, but they never had that. Horace Grant. They didn't have the truly superior front court.
Rodman,
skill. They were able to put specialized utility players in those roles because they had Jordan, they had Pippen.
Yeah. It's just because of Jordan, though. I mean, like you put that front court on any other team, they're not getting it done. That's
totally right.
In that era, you needed a good front court, but Jordan's and Pippen
gravity
were
was
so good.
Yeah.
So that's the inversion, right? The Knicks had a serviceable backcourt, but the Bulls had a serviceable front court. They had a superior
And at the
backcourt,
time,
and
it's funny
matters.
because
And
looking
wings.
back on it now, at the time it was thought you don't need a scoring point guard. Your point guard is there to just play defense and dish out the ball and go to his spots and whatever. And, it's more important to have a big bruising center that's going to get you your points. But the most dominant team of the era was wing and guard heavy.
Well, that was like the beginning of everybody going, oh, wings. It's all about wings now.
You might have clued in on the secret thing that people don't talk about because Houston's success, the 2 rings they went, their chapter is we saw our opening and we took it.
Yeah.
They get those 2 rings and everybody goes, Hakeem, and they should. Unbelievable
Favorite player of all time. He's sitting right in front of you right now.
Hell
Just
yes.
let you know that.
What's up, Mr. Hakeem? However, you might have uncovered a secret was that their backcourt is better than people give credit for.
Oh, the Jet?
Yeah. So Kenny Smith,
Mad
Vernon
Max?
Maxwell, Cassell. Then you have Drexler on the second version, and you have this depth. You have Robert Horry, this interesting, slightly large, like super sized but good wing, good enough defender, stretches the floor a little bit, and you combine that with Elijah one, and that might be the secret recipe when you talk about that team, and no one talks about that Rockets backcourt because it was more than serviceable. It was pretty good.
Oh, they were amazing. Yeah.
Everyone says it, and I think it's true. Everyone wishes we could have seen Bulls versus Houston at
the peaks.
peaks
I mean, to this day,
wanted-
because of that team, like I remember when Cassell got to the Clippers, and I almost went in tears. I was so happy
He was so good till the end of his career. He was still
massive
great.
Cassell. I still have a Cassell Clippers jersey in my closet at home. Like such a big Cassell
he
fan.
had that irrational confidence that was infectious to a team, right?
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of players who have the irrational confidence. We talk Pat Bev, right? But he was able to bring it and just enough. Like, did he ever make it? He never made an all-star team, but he was just one of those like high-level role guys who could take over games and dominate. And he did it from jump. You're right.
Yeah.
He was a rookie on those teams and like rookie in first year.
Playing minutes in the finals.
Playing minutes in the finals.
Yeah.
I think it's a fun conversation because that team, the Bulls actually go out and say, yeah, because I think the Rockets took regular season games from the 95, 96 and 96, 97 Bulls.
Yeah.
So I want to go back and watch those games because I haven't seen it because they really didn't have an answer for Olajuwon.
No.
Yeah.
No.
That would have been tough. But I mean, he was the first like skilled five, right? Like
Really
with
skilled.
finesse and all of that.
The real what if to me, and this
Kareem.
is
Fair.
Kareem was so amazing, and people lose him. And
I agree. He's one of the three
he's
best.
top three. Yeah, for sure.
That's what I think.
Yes, I think he's right there for me. He's so singular, and it's because his reach in terms of the game, how he was in the 70s, and I think about it, and it's like, okay, you can identify teams of and players of decades pretty easily. And I have a bigger theory that we shouldn't be looking at the NBA in decades, but half decades, because it's 5-year waves. The best player of 1980 to 1985, it's a very easy answer. It was Larry Bird. But from 85 to 89, 85 to 86 to 90, maybe Magic. It's probably Magic on paper, if you include winning and all that.
Yeah.
Isaiah Thomas.
Isaiah Thomas gets in there, but it's also Jordan too.
Yeah.
But Larry Bird's so good in that 5-year window, and people don't realize he was almost 4 years older than Magic.
Yeah.
And you see that difference in their stats because Magic's peak statistically is later. Even though he was having his success in the early 80s,
right.
You're still getting the tragic Johnson thing comes because he was a really young player,
Yeah.
And then he gets through that. Kareem is the best player from 1970 to 1980.
Yeah.
And there's some other arguments you can make.
Well, he's
but
also the
just
best player in
dominant.
college.
He was
He
the
was,
best
he was
player.
maybe the best college player ever.
I think it's almost inarguable. They changed
Yeah.
the rules, and he bent the rules of college athletics to his will.
And he was one of the first superstars to say, I want out, right?
right.
In Milwaukee. And,
Well, it's
and-
funny because I would if there's one player that I think you could compare to Kareem, it's Giannis. He's the one.
Oh, interesting.
I think in a lot of ways he reminds me of Kareem. Just the way he plays, sort of the out of other world physique,
That's right.
and the way he uses it, and then even his personality and the way that he thinks the game reminds me of Kareem too in some way, where he uses his intellect and his giant frame to score, as opposed to being like the most, like, obviously Kareem is extremely skilled, but he's
Yeah.
not dribbling the ball through his legs Kevin
Yep.
Durant.
No, he's not. I think my comparison for Giannis, and it's the one that gets made, I like the Shaq comparison because he's so physically dominant, but he's still figuring out what the extent of that is. So I'm thinking Shaq Magic era where Shaq's thinned out. And I'm not trying to make a body-to-body comparison, but there's a part of Kareem's game that is so entrenched in his physique. Like, we've had the run recently of like, oh, it's Kristaps Porzingis, and he's 7, and we're about to see Chet Holmgren, and they're more face-up game, right?
Yeah.
But Kareem is the original unicorn, right? Like, he's
100%.
this player who used his length and his body in such a way. If you can go back, and I think this is a really great exercise, watch some of that early 70s Bucks team. There's good clips of watching him versus Wilt, and it's late era Wilt, but it's still an amazing thing to see that and get context for what those players are like.
Yeah.
Kareem is fierce, and that's why when you were making that Giannis comparison, I'm like, okay, I got to rack my head for this because he's fierce, he's unbelievably athletic. There's things he's doing, and it's like those moments where they show Giannis or LeBron, and you see where their fingertips are in register to the hoop and the basket, and you're like, oh my God, his arm is 18 inches above the hoop, And Kareem's doing those things, and you're like, how can other players? This is where like guys who are 6'8" are going, this is just isn't fair.
Yeah,
you know, what are we doing? But that he was able to do so much on a basketball court. So watch some early 70s Bucks, and I have recently gone on a wave of watching the late 70s and early 80s All-Star games, which is really fun. And Kareem is still like kind of athletic, and he's being more playful. And I think that's the thing that is hard for me to register, because so much of Giannis to me is his joy and enthusiasm for the game.
Yeah.
And by the time I remember Kareem, it's just not there. And he was so much more stoic. Like when we're comparing personalities, Patrick Ewing felt like a statue when he played, because he was just emotionless in this. And there was more of that with Kareem. And you see flares, but when you watch the early 70s Bucks, he's snarling. And that's kind of awesome to see.
It is more the early Kareem, obviously. Because, you know, a guy who played for, 21 seasons, like there's going to be different eras of him, you know, but it's more about the peak Kareem reminds me of what we're seeing right now with Giannis in terms of, and just the Milwaukee thing, and
I agree,
the name, everything. Like there's a lot of weird comparisons.
Totally.
I think that's such a good reminder, is to appreciate what we have. And I'll share this anecdote. To appreciate the greatness in front of us. And I think that applies across the board. We can apply that to punk and hardcore music and these things. It's like, wow, when you're seeing something spectacular or amazing and moving in the moment, don't get sour grapes or weird contrarian about it. Like, you know, appreciate it. And I mean that for Giannis. I mean that for LeBron. I mean that for Steph. You might be a Warriors hater, but man, when you see Steph Curry putting up these 30-footers and they go in and the net doesn't move, it's like, good Lord.
Yeah,
that's
greatness.
Right. I did not appreciate Michael Jordan. I did not like him. He beat Magic Johnson in the finals. And through that series, I went in, I loved Magic. I was a Magic and Larry guy. If it was my choice, if in 1988 you asked me what I want to happen, I want the Lakers and the Celtics to be in the finals every season, because that was so electric and amazing to see. It's this contrast of styles, contrast of cities, all these narrative storylines that when it comes to sports and entertainment, it's perfect.
Yeah.
But Michael Jordan comes in and beats Magic, and I'm like, I don't think I like this Michael Jordan guy. And like, even through the series, you're like, damn, he's just unbelievable. And he was amazing. And that Bulls team, underrated, that first Bulls championship team. They were athletic. They got out and ran, and they made a Lakers team who wasn't that old. Magic was on the older side, but when we look at it now, he was like 31 or 32.
Yeah.
They made Magic and James Worthy look old. The rest of that team, I think you have young Eldon Campbell. You have Vlade Divac, who's young. You have Byron Scott, who's not old. You have this relatively young team with just a couple older key pieces. And Sam Perkins was a little mid-career, but they ran him off the floor. It took the second season when they go up against a Portland team who low-key was really fun to watch. That Trailblazers team was really fun. And at that point, the Jordan shrug game, that was the moment where I said, okay, I have to say this guy's amazing. Yeah. I have to get over this, because it allowed me to enjoy what unraveled for the next few years. And I was never going out and getting a Bulls jersey. I wasn't that kind of fan. I wasn't going to be like, oh, I'm a Bulls fan now. But watching them on NBC, it was amazing. And it made that experience. And it's why I'll say I think there's a lot of NBA agnostics where it's like, I have some teams I root for more than others, but I want greatness. And I think Michael Jordan, if more than anything, taught me that. Yeah. Because I was able to appreciate it. And that, like, I look back kind of in this nonpartisan way at that Suns Bulls finals, go, that was just incredible basketball. And watching those two teams, two great entities come together and play and be able to just root for a great game was fantastic.
I'm going to bring it back to something you just said a second ago, though, which is like the inspiration. So eventually, we'll get back to basketball, but eventually you start a record label, you book shows, you do all that stuff. What was the inspiration for wanting to book shows, start a label, get into that?
I mean,
did you know someone else who was doing it? Was there?
No, I mean, yes, but I didn't. It was like seeing other people do it and realizing that I could do it. Yeah. It was just where there's a will, there's a way. Just find the will, right? And that was part of it to me, was this idea of, and maybe it's the greatest singular concept from hardcore and punk music that you can apply elsewhere, is that art often just comes from the desire and then ability to go and try and do it. And so, I had nascently like goofed around with friends doing band stuff, and it didn't come together, and it was like, I don't know, it didn't always feel great. But putting on shows, I was like, well, I can do that. Okay, you mean I just need to find a place, convince the weird old guy to let me rent it, and oh yeah, it's like guitar music, like it's like, it's younger, it's like some of it's pretty loud, but it's all fun, it's all good fun, and get a PA. Well, I don't even really know what a PA is, but I can figure that out. And I think that dude knew how to figure it out, so I can. And so doing that, and then doing fanzines, and then eventually putting out records, it was just this idea to be involved. And to me, putting out records, it's like an art project. And to whatever extent you want to make it. Doing shows, there's an art to it. And like to me, a good show isn't these 4 bands on a tour package and you're going to book them and here it is. That's fine. That's cool. Some people love that, and there's an enjoyment in that, and I don't want to undercut that. But that wasn't to me. To me, this idea of like curating a lineup and putting together bands that was like, cool, and I want this band to play because they're really good, and I think it would be cool and a different energy. There's art in that, and there's beauty to that. So being involved in that kind of thing, it was just really fulfilling, and to me, it was creativity. And I talk about it with friends all the time. I don't know if there's anything more rewarding than creativity, and then doing that and going out and doing it.
So did that like organically lead you to Sound and Fury?
Yeah.
And because you talk about a festival, you're talking about the art form of essentially making a playlist. Like, we're going to start with this song, and then it's going to lead into this, and it's a good segue into this, and then bam, I'm going to bring it up here. And like, is that kind of like where Sound and Fury was born from? Because 100%. A festival is basically a live playlist that you're putting together.
It's trying to capture cool energy and what's going on in a moment, right? And I actually, a buddy of mine sent a photo. This is a friend who I've gotten to be very close with over many years, who I didn't even realize that we had met, but he sent a picture that he found. He's like, hey, is this you in this photo? And it was me wearing a suit with some other friends, and then he's in the photo too, right next to me. I was like, I didn't even realize that we had met then, and it was at Sync with Cali 2005. Yeah. Which, look, everybody should know that was a really awesome festival. That was a really great time, and it was a really good time. But I was there, and then Sean Riley from 1917 Records, who does Sound of Fury now, he was also there. And there was a few, and we were just talking, we're like, man, we think we could do something like this. And, but I had gone to Posy Numbers Fest in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania for years and years. And especially living out on the East Coast, that was omnipresent basically. And it was just this really cool vibe. And we were like, man, we think we could do something like this, like Sing with Cali, but a little more organized. And then what we wanted to tie into it and all this, and just make it this really cool thing. So yeah, it was creating our own spin and trying to decide, like, how do we capture everything we want to with this? And so Sound and Fury was just a way for us to capture this amazing energy, because hardcore and punk music ends up having certain pockets and segments of scenes. Just like music, you can hear these bands and they might be adjacent to these, but if you don't have that impulse to push over, you won't get exposed to it. So to me, a lot of times festivals and show booking ended up being like, hey, can I create a cool exposure point where you like Ceremony and you like Trash Talk, but maybe for some reason you hadn't gotten a chance to hear Mind Eraser yet. So let's put them all on the same show, and you're going to cross over. And maybe you've heard Mind Eraser and you also like this, but you haven't seen this in context, and you're going to go and you go, you know what? Maybe I don't love those records, but when I see it live, now I understand why people are really into this,
I actually had that moment for sure at Sound and Fury. The first year my band played, 2009,
Hell yeah.
It was amazing, and I wasn't like a youth crew kid.
Yeah.
I wasn't into a lot of the bands necessarily playing.
Sure.
And then I go and we have a crazy set, and it was amazing. And then the rest of the day, I'm watching all these other bands and being like, well, these are fucking insane. Yeah. And kind of being like, this is closer to what I think hardcore is than I perceived it to be, because a lot of these bands are from the East Coast, and they were mysterious to me. You know what I mean? Like,
they present as something that's the other from what I like. But then when you see it, you're like, wait a second, this is so much closer than I realize. And I think that's true in a lot of senses.
Yeah.
That 2009 lineup was one of the ones that we look back on and are personally like really, proud is a weird way to say it, but proud. And we were really happy with it. And I think that was the year, I think we had Despise You play. Mm-hmm. I think we had...
And I loved it. That was like one of the bands that I was like, oh, Despise You's playing. That's sick. Like, that's right down my alley.
Right, fastball. So that was, when we go into this kind of like the recipe and the ingredients, look, the Sound and Fury notebooks are really funny. And I have a couple where it's like, here's where I'm sitting in a class at, I think it was Orange Coast College at that point, before I went on to UC Irvine. And I'm like, here's where I first was scratching down names and wrote down Sound and Fury,
Yeah.
And to be really honest, there weren't many other. That was basically early, and I was like, hey, Sound and Fury, and Riley and Todd were like, yeah, Sound and Fury, cool, let's go with it. But it was like, oh, we wanted to have, for lack of a better term, representation from these different sounds and sonic avenues. So it was like, hey, if you're into Despise You, well, there's going to be Mind Eraser, and maybe I don't know if Soul Swaller played that year, but it was like, we want to have a few bands that's like, you're going to be like, well, I might not be super excited about these, and these bands I'm kind of unaware of, and there's a couple bands that I think those are okay, but here's the 3, 4, 5, 6 bands who I'm like, I want to see those sets, like, oh, Rival Mob's playing, let me go see that. I want to see this, I want to see that. So it was kind of always that importance of diversity, but then the sonic diversity where it can intersect and connect to things for people to enjoy and really kind of get into. And I know for a fact, and I think it's Riley, Martine, Madison all deserve so much credit, carrying that same kind of energy to now 2022. You're talking about 2009. Oh my God, that was 13 years ago, right?
I know.
And I mean, there was a couple
like
years.
Title Fight played then, and then you look at the lineup now, and there's bands who are literally influenced by Title Fight.
Uh-huh. Oh, I mean,
it's
right.
crazy how full circle it's come
when we
now.
look at the tease of that 2009 year, it was Title Fight, Touche Amora, and Trapped Under Ice.
I mean, we played for like 10 minutes, but it's nice to put us in
perfect.
there.
Yeah, well, but like as it goes on, people like those lineups age well, and people are like, oh my God. And I hope people understand that when you go to a festival. Look, I'm excited for the headliners that you want to see and all that. Pay attention to those midday bands.
Yeah.
Because those are the bands that people are going to go, oh my God, those bands all played together. And it's got, yeah. And they were all coming up, and these are these exposure moments where it's like, oh, cool. This was their opportunity to play in front of 1,000, 1,500 people way before. And so it's funny argument. Yeah. And it's a conversation I get into, especially now as I'm older, and with Axe to Grind, we talk about this, and we'll get emails from people being like, well, I'm 40, I'm 35, I'm 32, and a festival, that's a lot of bands. I'm like, look, if you thought a hardcore punk festival was being booked for you, I have to let you know, even I was 24 the first year we booked Sound and Fury. I felt like Methuselah. Ozymandias over here. Okay? But we were booking that for 18 to 20 year olds.
Yeah.
And we wanted, because it's like, that's the person who wants to go to that show, and they're like, cool. I'm going to sneak in, a Nutri-Grain bar in the parking lot, but I'm watching 12 bands today because I am excited for 10. And there's 2 bands I haven't heard, and I really want to hear them.
Yeah.
That's who that's for. All of us, we should go and have as much fun as we can. And if you can watch 5 sets, bless your heart, and enjoy all of it and try to catch some more, because it's that hard. It's the moment. And it's a conversation I have frequently with people. Like, if at 40, if at 35, if at 32, you were as excited or felt the exact same way about this band now as you would have for a comparable band when you were 20, that feels a little odd. There's this personal resonance to this music that really matters. And I tell people, I'm like, look, stay in the moment. Don't chase the dragon of that feeling, the magic you felt. It goes into this theory where I'm like, look, your first tension, let me tell you, people tell these stories of like, man, when I first started going to shows, you don't know, it was so crazy. And I'm like, it wasn't crazy. I've heard that same story from a person who started going to shows in 1982, 1988, 1995, 1999, 2010.
Yep.
No. You were just new to it.
Yeah.
And it was it was your magic moment. Don't undercut some 20-year-old's magic moment.
Totally.
And encourage them to understand that and understand it in this register, because that's where you go, oh, like when you are dismissing the music of now, understand that that is formative for the people moving forward. And if you treat it the right way, they'll do that for the next group of people too.
Totally.
Yeah, that's totally true. And then, you have these conversations on your show, Axe to Grind, which is, a podcast all about hardcore.
Yes.
Which it's funny, when I heard of the idea, I thought, well, there's not that much to talk about until you start talking about it.
Right.
And then it feels like you can talk forever, and it's endlessly fascinating.
Right.
And like you said, there's always a new crop of kids popping up, a new crop of hardcore bands. That's how it goes. I actually love, some people hate the disposable nature of it. I love this band was in a flash pan for 1 second and whatever.
Yeah.
Is that part of what, did you want to start it because you were getting older and you wanted to discuss the things that were important to you then? Or was it more like you got older and now I still like these bands and I want to talk about them now? Or what was really the inspiration for it?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it was kind of what you said first, where you start talking about hardcore and you realize there's a lot of things to say and a lot of different, I said it to a friend of mine who's certainly in the hardcore world, but was, we're talking about it, and it was like, you can talk about hardcore in a lot of different ways. And so it's fun to actually talk about the music and the musicality and like, man, that riff, oh my God. But if you only did that, it's finite.
Yep.
And it's really fun to talk about historical context and some older bands and then what's going on today. And that gives you a lot more room. But even that is sort of finite. Then there's the like dorm room conversations where it's like, oh, how do you feel about music now? And like, do the ethics of today matter to the kids of yesterday? And that would get really draining if that was the only thing you talk about. But if you ignore it, I think you're also ignoring a pretty important part of hardcore.
Yeah.
And if you only talked about the new 7-inch that came out, but don't talk about what came out last year and don't talk about classics, that's also finite, and you're staying in front of the 8 ball at all times. So we thought like, hey, let's have hardcore conversations like you have in the van or with your good friends about stuff, or in the group chat, and you just kick around and you try to, like, oh, check this out, this is really good. I have to give credit to Patrick and Tom still. We are in a group chat and we'll still send around the Bandcamp link. Oh, check this out, I heard this is really good. Oh, I saw this band, this is really cool. And I think it's a really fun way, regardless of your age, to stay kind of connected and try to expose yourself to stuff. And I also won't say that I feel like I'm totally in front of exactly what the pulse of hardcore 2022 is. But I like to work on it.
Yeah.
And it's fun to have that conversation and see what's going on. And so there's a selfish element of it for sure, of staying involved and doing it. But there's also questions of like, how do we do that without it being negative to what's going on? And how do we do it without also faking the funk? I don't want to put on airs and be like, man, everything's great. Yeah. All things are good. Because that's the wrong energy, and it's kind of like the conversation of music criticism and what role does it play, and so we try to pivot into honesty, but then advocacy.
Right.
Advocate for the things you love and think are really exceptional, and then things you maybe are not as interested in. You can give context, but try not to just unduly shit on it.
I think that's so real because like I even remember having a conversation with Patrick on tour one time about Axe to Grind, and I said, "You don't talk about Iron Lung Records enough. I love everything that they do." And he's like, "I don't know. Most of those bands break up in 2 seconds." And then all of a sudden we're talking about
you have the conversation about it.
Then we're having a conversation about it. Exactly.
That's such a good thing because that's a dude who actually, and as you listen to the show, and that's why I encourage the long form energy of it, is that you start to understand, oh, this is a guy who likes to see what the next development is. He doesn't, to quote my friend Eric Wilson, who said this, he's not necessarily interested in first draft hardcore. He wants to see what it evolves into. And it makes sense as you hear his musical taste. But that also means he can miss some of these brilliant flashes.
Right.
And that's the stuff then you go back and you go, oh shit, that Exit Order, they did a 7-inch and an LP, and I'm like, that's a brilliant record. There's Jesus,
I played them on the show a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Incredible. We were watching Exit Order videos yesterday because I said I think this is one of the best 5 live bands of the last decade in hardcore. I think they're unbelievable.
so underrated.
Completely, and they get lost in conversation. But it's okay.
They came and went fast.
That's right.
It is.
There's a band from, and I'm blanking on the name, but it's like a 7-inch. Called Power Beat. It's like the Power Beat. It's the 7-inch from Toronto that I think is just like, it's a fully punk hardcore record, believe it or not, and it's like somewhere between Motorhead and fast punk and Discharge and all these influences. And so somehow they capture like 80s era Age of Quarrel Cro-Mag sound better than anybody. But you wouldn't, the average like Lunkhead Cro-Mags fan isn't catching that because it just came and went and it's so good. I'm like, no, I want to shout this off the mountain.
Yeah.
So there's all these things that you get lost. And so I hope and I focus, I encourage that feedback. Like if we're missing something, tell us, but it better be great because we'll talk about it. If it's great, I want to talk about it. I just heard the Hologram LP I think is really good.
Really good.
Iron Lung just did that.
Yeah.
And there's always stuff and you can't, I try to encourage this. You can't catch everything. Nobody's going to catch everything. But listen, I could show you on my phone. Yesterday, I had my 5-hour flight from the East Coast to California. And this is one of my tricks of the trade. If you're scrolling on social media and you see somebody post something that looks interesting or sounds interesting, screenshot.
Or you trust their taste.
And you trust their taste. Screenshot it, put it away. And when you get a chance, you go back and I go through and I have a full Notes app list of things to check out when I can. And I'm going to go through and find, I guarantee I'm going to find a few things that I'm like, damn, this is exceptional. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's fun being.
The way you talk about hardcore and music and, appreciating all aspects of it so that it isn't this just binary finite thing.
Yeah.
Are you applying that to, watch this, basketball, and that's what makes you like an NBA agnostic? Like you don't have a team because you're just trying to capture all the things that you enjoy around the league as opposed to like being, stapled to
like
one franchise.
Man, I'm going to lay down on the couch here.
And when you open League Pass, there's not a team you gravitate towards. It's just hard for me to believe that you don't.
Oh, there always is. Come on.
You have to have a rooting interest somewhere.
It's in greatness. Which is tough because you could throw front runner on that label, but it's like, who wasn't fun to watch the bubble season or last year? The Golden State Warriors. Who was really fun to watch this year? The Golden State Warriors.
Yeah.
But you find teams and you find players, and this goes to like a pre-air convo we had, but player exceptional talent, skill, showmanship all plays in. I have to tell people, I low-key think if, and this is a big if LaMelo Ball keeps developing and can get a decided shot and somehow that Charlotte team with all their weird issues doesn't just completely fall apart, and even with those circumstances, he might be like a 28 and 10 assist guy this year based on the rest of the roster. He is unbelievably fun to watch. Yeah. So like I ended up watching a lot of Charlotte Hornets games because he was fun to watch. Bridges was fun to watch. They were the way they played their game was really fun to watch. So you know what? The Clippers, once Paul George came back last season, ended up being really fun to watch. The LA Lakers are a train wreck to watch since the LeBron era.
Since the bubble.
Yeah, since the bubble for sure. Once they got rid of the young core. So you end up going through these waves. And to get to your question here, which I really, fantastic psychoanalysis. I think it's trying to really enjoy the greater points of it and not get lost. Man, I think it would be a really hard time to be a Knicks fan. And I mean, I guess that could be said for the past 20 years. They had a fun run with the Randall Knicks last year, but it's frustrating. And
that was pixie dust, though. Everyone knew it.
Everyone knew
it. Everyone knew it.
It was a more extended, Linsanity thing, but at least the Linsanity thing had this magic energy around it. That last year Knicks team, it was fun, but they weren't playing some inspiring, exciting brand of basketball.
I never believed in it.
So then last season when it came back to earth, it was no surprise, but living where I live, I have the local access to Nets games, Knicks games, and Sixers games, so I could watch every single one. I found myself watching more Nets games, and I was watching all three of those teams. I was watching to watch the other team. And that's not Joel Embiid is incredible to watch. He's a fantastic player. But I haven't been inspired by their brand of basketball.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Celtics. Fun team. Second half of the season, fun to watch them. But over the past few years, it's always kind of been like, do these parts work? They had that Jason Tatum's just ISOing the ball for a season and a half period. So, the Nuggets are a fantastic team to watch. I explained my Denver roots.
They are, very fantastic to watch.
But it's largely Jokic. And the Nuggets were actually a really fun team in that post-Carmelo era. I didn't watch as much because of access, but it goes in waves. So, I had for years said the Rockets are my least favorite team because watching Harden play in his ISO, usage closer to 50 than 40 was painful. Now I'm excited to watch the Rockets.
Yeah, they're
season.
fun.
Are we going to see some Josh Christopher? What are we seeing here? What's Sengun going to be like? Like, it's fun to think. Do they get rid of Kevin Porter Jr.?
Well, anybody on the team pass the ball.
So to go more to
other than Jabari, I don't think they have anybody who's looking to help their teammates.
That's a fascinating question. Is who do they like?
Kevin Porter Jr.'s got to go in my eyes.
He's got to go.
Go get him Rondo, dude. Bring Rondo in. They need a true
Rondo
point guard.
might be too much of a general, but you're right. Like I said, okay, Chris Paul has another year in Phoenix. They don't win this championship. Can we get Chris Paul to Phoenix from Phoenix to Houston
back
back? But with this
the young guys,
because can he needs to do the tour and go to all the young teams and just distribute. He helps bring them to their best. And I'm not even a Chris Paul stan.
Yeah,
but we've
it's
seen
a little
him do
Sam
it.
Cassell who we brought up earlier. You know what I mean? Like a little or Chauncey Billups.
Billups was a great man.
Like there's these point guards that always play a little longer than they should.
Right.
But
there's
they have
at
such
least
great
value
leadership.
there. Yeah.
And they're just good enough on the court to make it work. And they're, you'll always have those guys. So you like LaMelo.
I love LaMelo.
I love LaMelo too. You're going to see a lot of Harden LaMelo this year though, because they got
that's what I'm
D'Antoni,
saying.
And
I think he's going to be high usage.
It's going to be high usage.
We don't know what the rest of the roster looks like.
There's going to be no Bridges. It's going to probably
likely no Bridges, likely no Montrezl Harrell, and
it's going to be the LaMelo show.
It's going to be the LaMelo show,
every night.
right?
And D'Antoni is his type of coach.
He's going to be running,
a goddamn about defense.
Run and gun. He's going to
at all.
10, 11, 12 assists a game, 5, 6, 7
They're going to win the exact same amount of
game.
games, but it's going to be fun.
Or less, right? Yeah. So I'm excited to see that development. Part of my holistic view of NBA and sports in general, especially as I get older, but the NBA is the easiest with it, is you start to realize all those narratives and storylines are fun to watch all unfold, and where do they move in, and the same thing. So it's really fun.
So who else do you like?
I'm fascinated by the Pelicans team. I'm curious to see how it all fits together. I think Ingram is a low-key, underrated, really good player.
Stud.
Good, not great. But you go, wait, he could be that for a long time.
Yeah.
And how does that interact with Zion coming back? Zion's exciting, but I have a lot of trepidation there. I think the Pistons are going to be interesting.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sky high on the Pistons. I'm a Cade.
You're a Cade believer?
I'm a big time Cade believer. I think he could. I'm not saying he will be, but I think he could be the best player in the league. I think it's possible.
Is Cade Cunningham the Grant Hill remix?
No, because he's not as athletic, but he's a better, he's a more polished player than Grant Hill was at a young age.
Correct. He's not as athletic. I think he has less of Grant. What people don't realize, he was a triple-double threat, even in a time when that wasn't there. He was a facilitator, but he wasn't a pass-first guy. And I think Cade is more of a pass-first.
100% he is.
So it's going to be interesting to see him on that team. I think Jaden Ivey is a really, really good fit next to him.
I mean, that's going to be, just for League Pass alert.
Yeah.
I mean, that is such an exciting backcourt to get behind if you're a Pistons fan.
Oh, my God. It's the most exciting Detroit basketball
since the 80s.
Yes, correct.
I mean, they won a title, but
those teams were, and that run is low key underrated. That they win that.
Sick,
they go
yeah.
Championship, finals, Eastern Conference Finals, Eastern Conference Finals, Eastern Conference Finals, Eastern Conference Finals, where they were superior level basketball. Anyways, but they were not exciting.
Box office.
Yeah. No.
Jaden Ivey is box
Jaden
office.
Ivey's box office. Duren with Cade Cunningham facilitating everything. I want to say sky's the limit. Sky's maybe not the limit. Playoffs is a possibility for that team.
The 10 seed playing?
Look,
you never know.
If the East falls the right way, it's going to be interesting. I think Mathurin is super exciting in Indiana. I just think we've had this wave of young players basically for the last 7 years where there have been very few high-end full busts, right? You know, full on, just like this was a dud. You know, even like a player like Lonzo Ball, solid pro. When he's not injured.
He's
more than solid.
If anything,
Right.
Markelle Fultz is the closest.
Markelle Fultz
But he's a good NBA player. He's just a mid-tier.
Starter level NBA player on his most days. So I think that's exciting. You want to hear maybe an unpopular opinion. Ben Simmons is going to be a fascinating story. Who wants to talk about him more than we have? But on a Brooklyn team that we have no idea what it's going to look like, that's going to be interesting. He's going to be given the keys to the car. We'll see what that looks like.
Yeah.
I think the West is going to be fascinating. I think if the Lakers don't maneuver right, we could have a full-on repeat of last season.
Oh,
full-on
100%.
Yeah.
You know,
They lost spacing.
Right. They are not exciting. They are Anthony Davis. Will he play 60 games? 50-50 chance.
Yeah.
Maybe. LeBron is going to be LeBron. He's going to break Kareem's record. That's going to be a moment. Will the team make the playoffs? We have the same odds on that as if Anthony Davis plays 60 games.
Yeah.
But I also wouldn't be surprised if they do make the right, I can't give up on the Lakers personally.
Okay.
I can't give up on them just because I've seen it enough to be like, it still could break right. I don't know.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Get it out of my
they're a Russ
system.
for Kyrie trade away from being like, damn it, we can't factor them out.
Because Lonnie Walker in the right situation could be an amazing upgrade in terms of last year. That team looked so slow.
Yes.
And just you're just getting run out of the gym at times. Whereas this team, they didn't solve their, like you said, their spacing issues are as bad as they've ever been. They have less shooters than they even did a year ago. But they did get more athletic. They're gonna be fun at times. They're gonna run and gun, and LeBron leaking out to Lonnie Walker is gonna be sick.
Well, the onus is placed on Lonnie Walker. Here you go, your make or break.
That's a bad.
You've had a few years. You've had a few years in San Antonio. Let's see what's going on. Why weren't you able to really crack a rotation? You were a high end. You're athletic. You showed these flashes, but it never came together. Why? So I know we're kind of starting to wrap up here, so I don't want to. But let's do your best get. Do the Lakers make the playoffs? Yes or no?
No.
Yes.
The West is loaded. Play in.
Okay.
I'm saying 9 or 10.
That's
because that Minnesota team is a 50-win team now. Whether people want to say it or not.
We can Utah do it real moves fast. Back. Utah's out.
Houston is out.
Portland's moving up.
Portland's moving up. I think they're at least playing on a disappointing level.
Mavs are in.
So, all right, let's go through. Golden State's in.
Yeah.
Mavs are in.
Suns.
Suns are in.
Clippers.
Clippers are in.
Nuggets.
Nuggets are in.
Pels.
Pels are in.
Are we sure?
I am.
Spurs are out. Rockets are out. Kings are out.
Kings might be in.
Yeah, Kings
are
could.
in the but I think I'm taking Lakers over Kings, even
I
though
am too,
on a
but-
holistic level I
Yeah.
might prefer that Kings roster.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, I get tricked into
Jazz
it every
are out.
year. I get tricked into it every year.
Okay, god damn it,
The Lakers are going
in.
to make it.
I know Lakers
That's
are
the thing.
in.
Is they're going to make it.
Lakers are going to be in. They're at the end of that line, but I think
Utah
it's,
falling out made
That's
a
right.
huge hole for, and San Antonio going full like we're done with
done.
DeJounte.
Yep.
We're
Yep.
going all 18-year-olds.
Is there a chance Oklahoma City is in the play-in?
No, they'll make sure
No.
of it.
But I think Portland replaces
I'm curious.
Utah.
I think they're going to trade Shai Gilgeous-Alexander if it comes down to it.
I agree. I think there's a
Unfortunately.
I agree. I think there's an odd setting where Chet is too galvanizing to a roster that's pretty solid. Where I don't want to say he's like breakout, but he showed flashes where I was a non-believer for his college career and was like, I don't know, I don't get it.
Chet.
The whole thing, Chet, yeah. And then those summer league. So maybe I'm reading too much in the summer league, like everyone always does. But man, he did look like he can play.
No, I just think it's more. I think it's less about Chet. I think it's more they think Giddey is their point guard of the future.
Yep.
Trey Mann is their
Backup.
shooting guard of the future. So I just don't see where Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and a slightly
Teo
older
Madeline
player.
is just forced out of the rotation. And I'm done. But no, it is.
I'm a big Trey Mann believer, so I might be on the high end of.
No,
what
they
he
still.
could
You're
be,
right.
but,
No, OKC.
he just doesn't quite fit in, and they're gonna get a haul for him, and
Yep.
so it's just like.
And I think
they're going to win too many games if he plays, so they're gonna make sure that he does play. And if you've seen, we'll end on this soon in a minute.
Yeah.
Like if you've seen the upcoming class, the Thompson twins,
Yeah.
like let alone obviously Victor Wembanyama, everyone's talked about it, everyone knows about him.
Yep.
The Thompson twins,
I know. They look
Scoot
great.
Henderson.
Scoot is.
It's a
Scoot,
joke how
Scoot
good
was playing against NBA young guys in that rookies sophomore game.
the
of
Thompson
All-Star
twins.
game.
I know like have been dominating adults.
Yeah.
At 18 years old. So I think a lot of teams like the Spurs and OKC are going to make sure that they're going to lose as many games as possible this
A
year.
race to the bottom.
All right. I feel like we could go for like another 6 hours on this. There's so much.
Likely.
The off season's the best because it's all about potential and figuring out. This is when conversations are the most fun because we haven't seen it yet. And
Well,
so,
it's all hope. It's all hope and dreams.
Yeah,
and being the
exactly.
best. Oh.
Exactly. Everybody's tied right now, so it's the perfect time of year for everybody. But we're definitely going to get you back in here. So that we can continue this conversation. I definitely want to continue the agnostic conversation because I'm a Clayton. I don't buy it. I know that there's a bias somewhere in there.
Okay.
There's no way you don't have.
I gave the tell earlier. It's Lakers Celtics. For some reason, there's something in those two.
Even then, you still got to get
jerseys.
off the fence, dude. You got.
I know. Well, my cousins in Boston will hold up knives to me if I give my real answer.
The rest of the city will as well.
That's
so,
right.
But we'll definitely have you back. Where do you want anybody watching or listening to go to check out the show, Sound and Fury? Like plug away right now.
So everybody should be following Sound and Fury on Instagram, Twitter, the whole thing. I'm not involved, but I love them, and they're doing great things, and they just continue to do amazing events in LA and California and hopefully the whole world. Follow Axe to Grind Podcast, Axe to Grindcast, Instagram and Twitter. Listen to us on all your favorite podcast stores. So we're there. Please listen to us. I do another podcast called In Search of Tracks with a good friend of mine where we talk mostly non-hardcore. We get into punk, we get into music of all types, and we get really nerdy. We really break down albums, talk about it, kind of tear it apart and talk about what we hear in the song. So we've gotten a lot of cool feedback about that. And yeah, that's the basics of it. I hope to be doing some stuff where we talk about sports and talk about other stuff in the future, but we'll do that on another episode.
Yeah. You always have a home here for that.
Thank you so much.
Well, Bob, thank you for joining us, man. We really do appreciate
it.
it, and this will be one of many for sure.
Awesome. Pleasure's mine. Thank you, guys.
Definitely. Thank you all for joining us. That's today's episode. We will be back next week with another very special guest as we power through the off season. It's going a lot faster than I thought it was going to. Clayton, what are we leaving everybody with today?
We are leaving everyone with a little lo-fi indie pop. a band called Toner from Oakland.
Hell yeah, love this. I ordered this LP. Yep.
Yes. Okay. So this is off the newer LP. It's called, what's it called? White Buffalo Rome. That's the LP name. Came out on Smoking Room Records, which I think is their label up there. They do a bunch of cassettes and cool limited stuff. So yeah, the band's Toner. The song's called Silver Lining from that new LP that just came out.
Sick. Hope you all enjoy it. Remember to be kind to yourselves and be kind to each other.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Too late for the one who gave it all away. I've seen you down, but not in the same way. You wasted all